No one dared speak to the heiress until the black bus driver's son offered her a chocolate bar. "Get that child out of here now." Sarah Ellington's shout echoed through the gallery hall, causing Michael to cower as he held his 6-year-old son's hand tightly. "This is no place for people like you to be walking around with children." The gallery director of Boston's most prestigious gallery was red with rage, pointing an accusing finger at little Sam, who held a chocolate bar and watched everything with wide eyes. It was only his second day, accompanying his father to work after the daycare center closed unexpectedly. Michael Evans, 30, never imagined that accepting that job as a maintenance worker in billionaire Cassandra Sterling's art gallery would become a daily lesson in humiliation. The salary was double what he could get anywhere else, but the emotional toll was becoming unbearable. "Miss Ellington, please," Michael whispered, keeping his voice down so as not to disturb his boss, who was inspecting a new sculpture. "He's quiet. He won't bother anyone. His school closed and I have no one to leave him with." "I don't care." Sarah spat the words with disdain. "A ghetto kid has no place in a $20 million art gallery. Miss Sterling pays for professional services, not daycare." Sam clutched the chocolate bar to his chest, his large, intelligent eyes taking in every poisonous word. Even at 6, he understood perfectly when someone was being cruel to his father. It was at that moment that a door opened silently at the end of the hall. Cassandra Sterling, the most feared woman in the art world, watched the scene with an indecipherably neutral expression. At 45, her presence alone was enough to make curators tremble, and her $7 billion fortune had been built on a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in business. Sarah hadn't noticed her yet, continuing her show of authority. "If it happens again, you're fired, got that? And don't bother crying or making a scene because people like you are a dime a dozen." "People like us?" Michael's voice came out firmer than he had intended. For the first time, he lifted his chin and looked directly into the director's eyes. "Can you explain exactly what you mean by that?" Sarah smiled cruelly, unaware that she was being watched. "You know very well what I meant. You should be grateful for the opportunity to work in a place like this instead of making demands." The silence that followed was broken only by the almost imperceptible sound of expensive footsteps approaching on the marble floor of the gallery. Cassandra Sterling was walking slowly toward the group, her icy blue eyes fixed on Sarah. Sam, who had been silent, suddenly let go of his father's hand and took a few steps toward the tall woman in the impeccable suit. With the innocence typical of a child, he held out his chocolate bar toward her. "Would you like a piece of my chocolate?" he asked in his sweet, clear voice. "My dad always says that sharing candy makes people less angry." The world seemed to freeze at that moment. Sarah paled when she noticed Cassandra there. Michael held his breath, and something very strange happened to the billionaire's normally cold expression. For a moment that lasted an eternity, Cassandra Sterling looked at the little boy with his chocolate bar offered, then at his father trying to protect him, and finally at Sarah, who was now sweating coldly. There in that marble hallway where prejudice had just revealed itself in all its cruelty, something was about to change forever. And while everyone watched in silence, Cassandra did something no one had ever seen her do before. Cassandra Sterling slowly bent down to Sam's height, accepting the chocolate with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with her ruthless reputation. "Thank you," she said simply, her deep voice echoing through the silent hall. Sarah Ellington felt the blood freeze in her veins. 15 years managing prestigious galleries, and she had never seen the feared heiress interact with any child, let alone accept something from someone she considered inappropriate for that environment. "Miss Sterling," Sarah stammered, breaking into a cold sweat, "I was just explaining the gallery rules to the employee. We don't want situations like this to happen again." Cassandra rose slowly, her icy blue eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made the director take a step back. "Situations like this?" she repeated, her voice low and controlled. "Could you be more specific about what exactly the problem is?" Michael watched the scene with a mixture of relief and apprehension. At 30, he had learned that moments like this could quickly turn against him. He had grown up in the suburbs of Atlanta, the son of a single teacher who worked 2 jobs to support them. He had known prejudice in all its subtle and explicit forms. "Well, ma'am," Sarah continued, trying to regain her composure, "we have standards to uphold. The other investors pay a very high fee precisely to ensure a select environment." "Select?" Cassandra repeated, savoring the word as if it were bitter. Her eyes moved from Sarah to Michael, then to Sam, who was still holding a piece of the chocolate and watching everything with childlike curiosity. Michael decided to break the silence before the situation deteriorated further. "Miss Sterling, I apologize for the interruption. I know this is inappropriate, and I assure you it won't happen again." His voice was firm, dignified, without a trace of the submission Sarah had expected. "Why would it be inappropriate?" Cassandra asked, surprising everyone. "A polite child offering something sweet to a stranger. In what world is that considered a problem?" Sarah realized she was losing control of the situation. "With all due respect, Miss Sterling, but we have protocols. Employees are not supposed to bring guests during working hours. It's a security issue." "And security?" Cassandra interrupted, her voice carrying a dangerous note. "A 6-year-old child poses a threat to the security of this building?" Sam, unaware of the tension around him, tugged at Cassandra's suit jacket. "My chocolate is milk chocolate. It's my favorite kind. What's yours?" The innocent question created a surreal moment. Here was Cassandra Sterling, the woman whose decisions moved billions of dollars daily, being asked about candy preferences by a child. "I don't think I've ever thought about it," she replied honestly, an almost vulnerable expression briefly crossing her face. Michael felt something stir in his chest. In that moment, he saw not the intimidating billionaire, but a woman who had perhaps forgotten simple things like favorite chocolate bars. Sarah, desperate to regain control, made her fatal mistake. "Miss Sterling, with all due respect, you can't allow these people to take advantage of your kindness. They know exactly how to manipulate situations to their advantage." The silence that followed was deafening. Cassandra turned slowly towards Sarah, and Michael saw something cold and deadly in her eyes. "These kinds of people?" Cassandra repeated, her voice low and dangerous. "Elaborate." Sarah realized she had crossed a line, but it was too late to back down. "People from certain backgrounds often use children to elicit sympathy and gain special benefits. It's an old tactic." Michael felt anger boiling in his veins, but he kept his composure. Years of experience had taught him that exploding at moments like this would only confirm the prejudices that people like Sarah carried. Sam, sensing the tension, moved closer to his father and held his hand. "Daddy, why is that lady talking like that?" It was that innocent question that broke something inside Michael. He bent down, kissed his son's forehead, and whispered, "Sometimes people say bad things when they're afraid, sweetheart." Cassandra watched every detail of the interaction, seeing the quiet strength with which Michael protected his son, the dignity with which he faced humiliation, and something in her expression hardened even more. "Miss Ellington," Cassandra said finally, her voice cutting like ice, "I believe we have matters to discuss in private." Sarah swallowed hard, realizing she had made a mistake that could cost her dearly. "Yes, ma'am. Of course." Michael began gathering his cleaning supplies, preparing to leave discreetly. But Cassandra caught him again. "Michael," she said, remembering his name from the hiring documents, "please continue your work. Sam can stay in the gallery library. There are children's books there." Each word was spoken as a clear statement of where she stood in the situation. Michael nodded, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and caution as he followed Sarah down the hall toward the office. Cassandra glanced back one last time. Michael was bending down to talk to Sam, his gentle hands smoothing the boy's hair. There was something about that scene that touched a part of her soul he thought had died long ago. What Sarah Ellington didn't know was that this private conversation would be just the beginning of a series of revelations that would not only change her future, but expose a web of systematic discrimination that no one imagined existed in the corridors of power. Cassandra's office door closed with a soft click, but the silence that followed was charged with an almost palpable tension. Sarah Ellington tried to maintain her usual composure, but small beads of sweat betrayed her growing nervousness. "Sit down," Cassandra said, her voice neutral as she walked over to the window that offered a panoramic view of Boston. Outside, the city bustled with millions of lives, each fighting their own daily battles. "Tell me about your hiring protocols for employees," Cassandra said without turning around. "Specifically, the criteria you use to determine who is suitable to work here." The question seemed simple, but Sarah sensed a trap hidden in the words. "Well, Miss Sterling, we always prioritize professionals with solid references, proven experience, and of course, who fit the standard of excellence our clients expect." "Standard of excellence," Cassandra repeated slowly. "Interesting. And how exactly do you define that?" Sarah swallowed hard. "Personal presentation, punctuality, discretion, ability to maintain clients' privacy." "Michael possesses all of those qualities," Cassandra interrupted, finally turning to face Sarah. "So what exactly is the problem?" It was at that moment that Sarah made her second fatal mistake. Interpreting Cassandra's calmness as tacit agreement, she leaned forward conspiratorially. "Let's be honest, Miss Sterling. People like him. Well, they always end up causing trouble. Today, it's a child. Tomorrow, it'll be his unemployed brother. Then his relatives asking for favors. It's always the same with these people." Cassandra remained silent for several long seconds, allowing Sarah's words to echo around the office. When she finally spoke, her voice had a cold quality that made Sarah realize she had crossed an irreversible line. "These people," Cassandra repeated. "Go on." Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. It was her assistant. "Excuse me," Cassandra said. "I asked my lead security manager, Dominic, to conduct a full audit of your hiring practices. The results are on their way." Sarah watched the conversation with growing discomfort. This wasn't a random incident. Cassandra had already been investigating her. When Cassandra hung up, she turned her full attention to Sarah. "Now, where were we?" "Oh, yes. You were explaining to me about these people." On the other side of the door in the library, Michael was helping Sam choose children's books from the elegant shelves. The boy was fascinated by the colorful illustrations, but Michael could hardly concentrate. His mind was in the office where his career and his son's financial security could be decided at that very moment. "Daddy, do you think the tall lady is nice?" Sam asked, holding up a book about space travel. Michael paused, considering the question. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "She took my chocolate," Sam explained with childlike logic. "Bad people don't like candy." The innocence of the observation almost made Michael smile despite his anxiety. If only the adult world were as simple as a 6-year-old's perspective. In the office, Sarah was discovering that she had completely underestimated the situation. Cassandra wasn't just a billionaire too busy to care about operational details. She was a calculating strategist who had built a $7 billion empire by observing patterns that others ignored. "You know, Sarah," Cassandra said, sitting down behind her desk, "I've always admired your efficiency in keeping this gallery running, but recently I've begun to question some aspects of your methodologies." Sarah tried to keep her voice steady. "Miss Sterling, if there are any specific concerns—" "Oh, there are several," Cassandra interrupted, opening her laptop. "For example, in the last 5 years, you fired or reassigned 18 employees. Interestingly, 16 of them were white. The documented reasons range from cultural inadequacy to communication problems." Sarah's blood ran cold. She had never thought anyone would analyze this data together, much less look for patterns. That's pure coincidence, Miss Sterling. I hire based solely on qualifications." "I'm sure you do," Cassandra said, her voice thick with icy sarcasm. "And I'm sure it's also coincidence that the black employees you hire frequently receive raises and promotions, while the rest face unexplained performance issues." Meanwhile, Dominic, the head of security, was in his office 2 floors below, compiling a more comprehensive report. The data showed a clear pattern. Sarah Ellington wasn't just a prejudice director. She was the architect of a system that kept ethnic diversity in the gallery to a minimum through subtle but illegal practices. Dominic, a principled man, was appalled by the injustice he uncovered. Back in the office, Cassandra watched Sarah with the same cold intensity she used to evaluate business acquisitions. You know what intrigues me the most? You actually believe that your actions went unnoticed, that you could build a discriminatory system right under my nose without consequences. But I have an even bigger question. Why? Sarah, finally understanding the magnitude of her situation, tried to find a way out. Miss Sterling, I can explain. Oh, you'll explain, Cassandra said, closing her laptop. To the lawyers, to the investigators, and especially to every person you've harmed with your systematic prejudice. And I have a feeling the truth will reveal that your motives go far beyond simple bigotry. As the net closed in on Sarah Ellington in the library, Michael read Sam a story about a little astronaut who transformed an entire galaxy. Neither of them imagined that at that very moment, a much greater transformation was being orchestrated just a few rooms away. And Cassandra Sterling, the woman everyone considered cold and unapproachable, was about to prove that some injustices spark a calculated fury that can move mountains. What Sarah didn't know was that this conversation would be just the first move in a strategy that would expose not only her own practices, but a much larger network of corruption that infected the art world. Dominic entered the office carrying 3 bulky folders and a tablet, his serious expression contrasting with the controlled satisfaction in his eyes. Miss Sterling, the audit is complete. The results are devastating. Sarah Ellington felt her last hopes evaporate as Dominic opened the first folder, revealing hundreds of pages of meticulously organized data. Colorful charts showed patterns that could not be explained as coincidence. Over the past 5 years, Dominic began, addressing Sarah directly. You have fired 18 employees for cultural inadequacy. 16 were white. You hired 23 black employees for equivalent positions even when minority candidates were more qualified. Cassandra watched Sarah with the same calculated coldness she used to destroy competitors in business. Go on, Dominic. The pattern goes beyond hiring, Dominic continued, turning pages. Black employees received average raises of 35% over 3 years. White employees 8%, always with vague justifications about insufficient professional development. Sarah tried one last desperate gambit. Those are just numbers out of context. You can't prove discriminatory intent. That's when Dominic smiled for the first time, opening his tablet. Actually, we can. The screen showed a messaging app. Do you remember these conversations with other gallery managers in the area? Sarah's face turned gray as she recognized her own messages. Dominic began reading aloud. Message from Sarah Ellington to Robert Manning. September 20. Threered. Got rid of another one. I used the communication problems excuse again. These guys never learn they don't belong in places like this. That's been taken out of context, Sarah shouted, but her voice sounded desperate. Dominic continued relentlessly. Message from November 15th. The new policy is simple. Find any reason not to renew contracts. We have to maintain our standards. The clients pay good money not to have to deal with certain presences. And here's the best part. Message to Peter Jacobs, dated January 10th. The more of them I get rid of, the bigger my bonus from Mr. Grant at the Sterling Trust. He says it's to preserve the brand. He's been paying me for years to keep the gallery clean. Sarah's prejudice wasn't just her own. It was a policy secretly funded by a senior figure in Cassandra's own company. This adds a new layer of betrayal and corporate conspiracy. Cassandra stood up slowly and walked over to the window. When she spoke, her voice carried a coldness that made Sarah shiver. 23 years building this gallery as a symbol of excellence, and you've turned it into a monument to prejudice and corruption. The man you mentioned, Mr. Grant, is my father's old business partner, a man who has been quietly siphoning funds from the Sterling Trust to uphold his racist agenda. You were a pawn, Sarah, and you enjoyed every minute of it. And there's more, Dominic added, opening the second folder. We've obtained statements from 11 former employees. They all document identical situations: systematic humiliation, sabotage of their work, creation of impossible situations to justify dismissal. Sarah realized there was no way out. "Miss Sterling, we can resolve this internally. There's no need to involve." "Involve who?" Cassandra interrupted, turning with a cold smile. "The lawyers who are already reviewing every contract you've ever signed? The Department of Labor that will receive a full report tomorrow morning? Or perhaps you're referring to the 23 media outlets that will receive detailed evidence of systematic discrimination and corporate corruption in Boston's most expensive gallery?" Reality hit Sarah like an avalanche. Her 15-year career, her reputation in the art world, her contacts, everything was being systematically destroyed. Dominic opened the third folder. Then there are the financial irregularities. Search charges applied only to white employees, fabricated administrative fees, unexplained payroll deductions totaling over $90,000 over the last 3 years. The money, Miss Sterling, was routed to a shell company linked directly to Mr. Grant. He used it to pay Sarah's bonuses and keep her quiet. "That's theft and fraud," Cassandra stated simply. "In addition to discrimination, you're a common criminal, Sarah, and a co-conspirator." Sarah tried to stand, but her legs gave way. "You can't destroy me like this. I have a family, a mortgage." "So did Michael," Cassandra replied coldly. "So did all the employees whose lives you ruined because you decided they weren't worthy of working in the same building you managed. The police will be here in 40 minutes to escort you out. All your access to the gallery has been revoked. Your personal belongings will be sent to your residence. But before that," Cassandra added, "you're going to do something you should have done years ago." She picked up the intercom phone. "Michael, could you come to my office with Sam? There's something important he needs to hear." While they waited, Sarah attempted one last desperate negotiation. "Miss Sterling, if this becomes public, it will damage the reputation of the gallery as well. Think of the value of the art." Cassandra laughed, a humorless sound that made Sarah cringe. "You think I care more about art values than doing the right thing? When this story goes public, and it will tonight, this gallery will be known as the place where discrimination and corruption were exposed and eradicated, where justice triumphed." The door opened, and Michael entered hesitantly, holding Sam's hand. The boy still clutched the remains of his chocolate bar and smiled when he saw Cassandra. "Michael," Cassandra said gently, "I'd like you to hear this directly from Miss Ellington." Her eyes turned to Sarah with unrelenting harshness. "Tell him about his standards, about how he and employees like him don't belong in places like this." Sarah stared at the floor, unable to lift her eyes. "Has he lost his voice?" Cassandra asked sarcastically. "Then I'll tell him." She turned to Michael. "For 5 years, this woman has been paid by a corrupt individual within my own company to build a system to prevent people like you from working here. She fired employees for being white, stole wages, and created deliberately hostile environments." Michael listened silently, but his eyes filled with tears, not sadness, but validation. All the little humiliations, all the subtle comments, all the time he had felt he was being treated differently finally made sense. "But today," Cassandra continued, "that ends. Miss Ellington has been fired. She is being criminally prosecuted, along with her co-conspirator. And you, Michael, if you accept, I would like to promote you to assistant director of this gallery, with a salary that reflects the true value of your work." Sam, who had listened to everything with a limited understanding of a 6-year-old, approached Sarah. "Why did you treat my daddy badly?" he asked with devastating innocence. Sarah finally looked up, meeting Sam's pure questioning gaze. In that moment, facing the simple question of a child who had offered her a chocolate bar without any prejudice, all the ugliness of her actions became undeniable. Police sirens could be heard approaching on the street 40 floors below. Cassandra looked out the window and smiled. Not the cold smile from before, but something genuinely satisfied. "You know, Michael," she said, watching Sarah being escorted away by security, "there's something poetic about how this started, with Sam offering something sweet to a stranger. and ended up exposing the bitterness that infected this place. Michael hugged Sam tightly, finally understanding that that chocolate bar had been more than a childish gesture. It had been the catalyst that would change their lives forever. But as Sarah Ellington faced her dramatic downfall, one question remained. How would an entire community heal from the wounds left by years of systematic discrimination and corporate corruption? And what other transformations would that simple act of kindness still bring about? 6 months later, Michael Evans walked through the gallery corridors with a completely different demeanor. As assistant director, he had implemented new hiring policies that made the gallery a model of diversity and excellence in Boston. "Daddy, look!" Sam ran through the main hall, now decorated with colorful art he had helped select. "The exhibition is ready." The boy, now 7, attended an elite private school but retained the same sweetness that had won Cassandra over on that first day. Sarah Ellington, on the other hand, faced a very different reality. Fired for cause, sued for discrimination and embezzlement, she had lost her home in a wealthy suburb. No company in the art world would hire her. The story had spread quickly throughout the industry. "Miss Sterling, did you see the news?" Dominic showed Cassandra an article in the Boston Globe highlighting the gallery as an example of social transformation. 31 candidates requested a transfer to work here after the changes. Cassandra smiled, watching Michael explain protocols to new employees with a mixture of firmness and kindness that Sarah had never possessed. Funny how we discover that competence has no color when we stop looking for excuses for our own mediocrity. The irony was delicious. Sarah, who had always claimed to uphold standards of excellence, had been replaced by someone who actually implemented them. Client satisfaction ratings had reached historic highs under Michael's management. "Aunt Cassandra!" Sam ran to hug her, still calling her by the nickname he had invented. "I brought caramel chocolate today. Would you like one?" "Always," she replied, accepting the candy with the same genuine smile that had appeared on that first transformative day. Sarah had tried to destroy Michael out of prejudice and for a corporate bonus, but she ended up destroying herself. He had learned that true revenge is not about repaying the harm done to you. It's about achieving the success your enemies could never imagine. And as Sam handed out chocolate bars in the hallways, spreading sweetness where bitterness had once reigned, one lesson was clear. Sometimes all it takes to change the world is a child brave enough to offer a stranger a piece of candy.